They say the trees in Blackwood whisper at night, not from the wind, not from the rustling of leaves, but with voices, human voices, calling your name from the dark. My name is Clara Morgan, and tonight, I'll tell you a story that still clings to the shadows of Blackwood, New Jersey, a quiet town in Camden County, buried in thick forest, the kind of place where neighbors wave politely, everyone's home by 7. And no one ever talks about the fall of 1994. Before we go any further, if you love true-sounding horror stories that make you question what's real and what's not, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more tales like this, some even stranger. This is Clara After Dark, and things are just getting started. Now, back to Blackwood. In '94, life there was simple, safe. Kids biked to school. Families gathered for church on Sundays. The biggest scandal was whether the high school quarterback cheated on his math test. But just west of town was Green Hollow Preserve, a patch of forest that looked normal from the road until you stepped inside. Then the air changed. The silence grew heavy, and the deeper you went, the more it felt like something was listening. This story comes from Lillian Hart. She's 41 now, a nurse, married, 2 kids, but back then, she was just 12, living with her parents and her twin brother, Caleb, in a small blue house on Sycamore Lane, right on the edge of the woods. Their parents were old school. No Halloween, no ghost stories, no nonsense. So, when Lillian and Caleb started hearing things, they were told to stop imagining things, say a prayer, go to sleep. But the noises didn't stop. It started as scratching on their windows, branches tapping the walls, even when there was no wind. Then came the whispers, faint at first, just enough to make you think it was in your head, until one night. Lillian, the voice was slow, cold, like it was right beside her bed. She ran to Caleb's room, thinking he was playing a prank, but he was already awake, sitting up, pale. He'd heard it too. Night after night, the whispers returned. Lillian, come outside. Don't be scared. Caleb is already waiting. She bolted to his room, empty. The back door was open. She found him standing barefoot in the backyard, staring at the woods, frozen, unblinking. She grabbed his arm. Nothing. He didn't move. Then she heard it. From the trees, a voice louder than before, inhuman. And just beyond the fence, a figure, 2 tall arms too long, not quite human. Its face blurred like her mind couldn't fully register it, and it never moved. Not when she screamed, not when she dragged Caleb back inside. It just stood there, watching, waiting. After that night, things started to change. Lillian said Caleb wasn't the same anymore. He barely spoke. He didn't laugh. He didn't even flinch when their dog barked in his face. It was like something had drained the color out of him. Every night, he'd wake up at exactly 3:03 a.m. and walk to the window, just to stare at the woods. Sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, and the whispers didn't stop. They only got smarter. One night, Lillian heard her mother's voice calling her from outside. "Sweetheart, come help me with the laundry." But her mother was asleep in bed. Another time, she heard Caleb screaming her name from the trees while he was right beside her, fast asleep. The forest had learned their voices. It could mimic them perfectly. The only thing keeping her grounded was the tiny silver cross her grandmother had given her before she passed away. She'd started wearing it every day, and every night she'd press it to her chest while praying that whatever was out there would leave them alone. It didn't. 1 week after Caleb stood in the yard like a statue, he vanished. It was a Saturday. Lillian remembered because their mom had made pancakes. Caleb was in his room, still in pajamas. He barely touched his food. Then, around noon, he said he was going to take a nap. When Lillian checked on him 30 minutes later, his bed was empty. The window was wide open, and on the windowsill, there was a single handprint, too big to be Caleb's, and not shaped right. The fingers were long, too long, with deep grooves like bark running across the palm. She screamed. Her parents searched the house, then the yard, then the woods. Police were called. Dogs were brought in. Search parties combed the trees for days. But Caleb was just gone. No trail, no scent, no signs of struggle. Just that single, inhuman handprint, the whispers that never left. The town closed ranks after that. People stopped talking. The woods were sealed off by temporary fencing. Kids were warned again, more firmly than ever before. But no one explained what had happened. Not to Lillian, not to anyone. The story just faded, covered by polite silence and false smiles. The official report said Caleb must have run away, maybe into the woods, maybe farther. It didn't matter. Blackwood didn't want a mystery. It wanted normalcy. But Lillian knew the truth. She saw it. That thing, that figure, the night it first whispered her name. And now, it had taken her brother. 29 years later, I arrived in Blackwood. It was October 2023. Foggy mornings, cold nights, and a strange heaviness in the air. Like the town itself remembered something it refused to say out loud. I wasn't there on accident. I had followed a trail of cold cases stories like Lillian's that led me here. Whispers in other towns. Forests where children vanished. Reports of voices with no bodies. And in the center of it all was Blackwood. The town hadn't changed much. Still quiet. Still polite. Still pretending nothing had ever happened. But Green Hollow Preserve, that was different. Now it was surrounded by rusted chain-link fences. Signs warned of environmental hazards and tick infestation. But locals knew better. No one went near it. Not hunters. Not teens. Not even stray dogs. The library was where I found her. Lillian Hart. Now in her 40s. Faded blonde hair pulled into a loose bun. Eyes that looked far older than her face. She didn't speak until I mentioned Caleb. She froze, then asked one question. Why are you digging this up? I told her the truth, that I'd heard too many stories like hers, that I wasn't trying to sensationalize. I just wanted to understand, to warn people, and to find out if they were still whispering. Her silence told me everything. She didn't want to remember, but she also didn't want to let it happen again. She invited me to her home, small place on the edge of town, not far from where she grew up. Still had a view of the woods through her kitchen window. Sometimes, she said, when I leave the window open at night, I hear Caleb's voice, asking to come back in. That line broke something in me. She never recovered from that night. Never stopped listening for him. Never stopped wondering if she could have done something more. Then she handed me a box. Inside were drawings made by Caleb, simple, childlike sketches, trees, a house, their family, and one image that made my skin crawl. A tall figure with long arms and black holes for eyes. It was drawn over and over again, in the margin of his schoolwork, in the back of a Bible, on napkins, on the bottom of his shoes, always the same. Sometimes it stood in the woods, sometimes it hovered near his bed, and once it was drawn inside the house. Caleb said it wanted a twin. Lillian whispered that it only needed one. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by my motel window, staring out at the distant line of trees, wondering what Caleb saw, what took him, and what it might want now. Because if the whispers were still happening, then someone else was in danger. 3 nights later, I went back to the woods. Not during the day. That would have been too easy. I waited until 2:45 a.m., the exact time Caleb used to wake up. I left my car at the edge of what used to be the main trail into Green Hollow Preserve. The fence was twisted and rusted, like something had torn through it from the inside. The warning signs were barely hanging on. I climbed through the gap and stepped into the trees, and everything went silent. No crickets, no wind, not even my own footsteps felt real. It was like the forest swallowed sound itself. And for a moment, I almost turned back. Then I heard it. My name, Clara, soft, gentle. A whisper brushing past my right ear. I froze. Clara. This time, it came from the left. The voice was mine, exactly mine, down to the breath at the end of the word. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. Nothing, just fog, shadows, and that feeling. The one you get when something is watching you, not from a distance, but right behind you. I turned again, still nothing, but I knew better. I kept walking. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. Trees leaned unnaturally toward each other, like they were whispering secrets. Bark peeled in long strips that looked like claw marks. The air got thicker, like syrup in my lungs. Then I found the clearing, dead center of the woods. A circle of trees twisted into a spiral above a patch of bare earth. No grass, no leaves, just black soil, dry and cracked, as if nothing had dared grow there in decades. And at the center, a single child's shoe, old, dirty, faded blue stripes. I knelt down to touch a hand. That's when I felt it. A hand on my shoulder, not cold, wooden, hard, grooved like bark. I didn't scream. I couldn't, because when I turned around, there was no one there, just the woods, watching, listening. Then the whispers came again. Not just one voice now, dozens. Some crying, some laughing, some just repeating the same word over and over. Clara, Clara, stay. I stumbled back from the circle and ran. Branches slapped my face. Roots clawed at my boots. But I didn't stop. I didn't breathe until I saw the fence again. And even then, I heard it behind me. The dragging sound, like something tall was following, just out of sight. I didn't sleep when I got back. I sat in the motel bathroom with the lights on, shaking, holding the notebook full of Caleb's drawings. And on the back cover, I swear it wasn't there before, but now, drawn in pencil, was me. My hair, my jacket, my flashlight, standing in the woods, with something tall behind me, and the word written above it all, twin. The next morning, I drove straight to the Blackwood Historical Society, a small brick building hidden between an old bakery and a boarded-up barber shop. The windows were dusty. Inside, it smelled like mildew, paper, and time. An older man behind the desk looked up from his newspaper. "You new in town?" he asked. "Just passing through," I lied. "Clara Morgan. I'm looking into something, the Green Hollow Preserve, and Caleb Denning." He paused, then he folded his paper, slower than necessary. "You shouldn't be digging there," he said, voice flat. "I already did," I answered. He didn't flinch. Instead, he stood and walked to a locked cabinet. After a long pause, he pulled out a folder wrapped in twine. "No one ever really leaves Blackwood," he muttered. Inside the folder, photographs, sepia-toned, blurry but haunting. The first showed a group of townsfolk standing in front of the original Blackwood church. 1,896, the caption said. I counted them. 12 children, each one holding hands, each one with burn marks around their wrists. The next photo chilled me to the bone. A mass grave, rows of bodies wrapped in linen, smoke still in the air. The town records beneath it read, October 1896. The Whispering Fire claimed 38 lives. Cause unknown. Survivors refused to speak. I looked up the Whispering Fire. I asked. The man nodded. It started in those woods. They said it talked, promised things, told children they could bring back what they'd lost. Some say it showed up as family. Others heard it as their own voice. My blood turned cold, just like what I heard last night. Just like how it whispered my name in my own voice. He leaned in. They called it the Hollow One. I didn't blink. He continued, tall as two men, skin like trees, arms that reached the ground. It didn't walk. It glided, took root in the ones who listened too long. And Caleb, I asked, He shook his head. There's always a Caleb, every few decades. A child who hears it clearer than the rest, and then it starts again. The drawings, the dreams, the disappearances, but he's not the first, I whispered. No, the man said, and he won't be the last. I stared at the photo again, at the burned wrists, the scorched forest behind the church, at a shadow in the corner of the photo, not a tree, not a person, just the outline of something watching, tall, still waiting. I returned to Green Hollow just before dusk. The trees felt taller this time, thicker, as if they'd grown overnight. The trail I'd followed before was gone, swallowed by moss and time, but I knew where I was going. The clearing, the whispers had gone quiet. That worried me more than hearing them. I held the old photo tight in my coat pocket, the one with the 12 children and the burned church, the shadow in the corner. I needed to know if it was still here, if it ever left. The deeper I went, the darker it got. I didn't need my flashlight. The moon was unnaturally bright, too bright, as if the forest wanted me to see. And then I saw him, Caleb, standing in the middle of the clearing, barefoot, his back turned to me. Caleb, I called out. He didn't move. I stepped forward. Caleb, it's Clara. You know me. Still no response. Then I noticed something. His hands stretched down unnaturally, not by length, by something pulling them. Whispers began again, but not around me. Inside me, they came from my bones, my blood. They wore my voice like a mask. Let him go. Go back, Clara. You're not ready. You're too late. Stop, I screamed. Caleb turned around slowly, his mouth opened, but it wasn't him who spoke. It was all of them, all 12, layered voices spilling out of a child's throat. We told you not to come back. And behind him it rose, from the earth, from the trees, from the blackened roots beneath the clearing, the hollow one, taller than before, its arms dragging behind like loose vines, its chest split open like bark struck by lightning, revealing rows of tiny, childlike teeth gnashing inside. It didn't walk toward me, it floated. Clara Morgan, this is what you came for. The whispers screamed louder. And then I heard my mother's voice, but she's been dead for 9 years. Come home, Clara. I fell to my knees. Memories flooded in her laugh, her hands, her lullabies. And just when I was about to answer, I saw her in the tree line. My mother, but wrong. Her face smiled too wide. Her eyes were bark, and her hands burned black. The hollow one twisted toward her, speaking in every voice I'd ever trusted. You belong to us now. I could feel the cold grip of the hollow, one's presence tightening around me, like ancient vines twisting through my very soul. The whispers, once soft and inviting, had turned into a sinister chorus of voices, clawing at the edges of my mind. No, I said, my voice trembling but determined. You don't own me. I'm not your prisoner. The hollow one's laughter was a dreadful sound, a cacophony of broken, children's voices layered with the groans of the forest itself. The air thickened with decay, and shadows stretched like grasping hands. In desperation, I reached for the silver locket my mother had given me years, a Goa talisman of love, hope, and protection. Clutching it tightly, I felt a faint warmth pulse through my fingers, a fragile anchor against the darkness. Caleb stood still, his vacant eyes fixed on the blackened sky. But then, a flicker, a spark of something real, something human crossed his gaze. For a moment, I saw the boy I once met, not the hollow shell the forest wanted him to become. I called his name again, softly this time, Caleb. Remember who you are. You're stronger than this curse. You don't belong to the hollow one. The forest around us groaned as the trees bent and swayed, roots snaking toward me like giant serpents. The hollow one's arms extended, long and twisted, trying to pull me into the earth. The whispers grew louder, screaming warnings and threats. My heart pounded. My breath came in ragged gasps. I closed my eyes and summoned every memory I had. My mother's laughter, the first time I stepped into Blackwood, the kindness of the old historian who warned me. I whispered prayers, not just for protection, but for redemption. The silver locket's glow brightened, casting a pale light over the clearing. The oppressive weight of the forest seemed to lift, if only slightly. Caleb's hand reached out, trembling but real. I grasped it firmly. "You're not alone," I said, voice breaking with relief. "We fight this together." The hollow one hissed, its bark-like skin cracking, as if wounded by a defiance. It recoiled into the shadows, its form dissolving into the twisted roots and broken branches. For the first time in 100 years, silence fell over Green Hollow. The oppressive whispers faded into the soft rustling of leaves. I pulled Caleb close, feeling his warmth against the cold night. "We are survivors," I said, "not victims." But as dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and gold, I knew this wasn't the end. The Hollow One would return, and so would the whispers, waiting, watching for the next soul to listen. The morning sun filtered weakly through the thick canopy as I left the clearing behind, Caleb by my side. The air was still heavy, but the oppressive presence had momentarily lifted. We needed answers. I remembered the old town library in Blackwood, a small brick building with dusty shelves and secrets hidden in yellowed pages. The librarian, Mrs. Whitaker, had known the town's history longer than anyone. I hoped she could help me unravel the mystery of the Hollow One. Inside, the smell of old paper and ink greeted us. "Clara Morgan," Mrs. Whitaker said softly when I introduced myself. "I've been expecting you." She led us to a dim corner where a collection of diaries and town records lay. The oldest one dated back to 1885, the year the church fire happened. As I flipped through the fragile pages, I uncovered stories of a cult that had once thrived in Blackwood worshippers of ancient forest spirits, practicing dark rituals to appease the Hollow One. The cult believed that the Hollow One was a guardian of the forest, but also a harbinger of death for those who disrespected the woods. The children who disappeared were said to be offerings, their souls trapped in the Hollow One's grasp. A shiver ran down my spine. Caleb looked pale as he listened. "But why now?" I asked Mrs. Whitaker. "Why is it coming back?" The librarian's eyes darkened. "Because someone disturbed the roots, someone like you." I swallowed hard. Had my investigation awakened something long buried? I clenched the silver locket again. This was no longer just a story. It was my fight, my curse, and possibly my salvation. The fragile diary's pages crinkled under my fingers as I leaned closer, Caleb watching silently beside me. The faded handwriting described a ritual, a dark ceremony, performed by the cult to bind the Hollow One's power to the forest, using the souls of children as fuel. The words were chilling. To keep the forest alive, the guardian must feed on innocence, the diary warned. The cult's leader, a man named Elias Crow, was said to have made a pact with the entity, promising protection in exchange for sacrifices. But one night, the ritual went horribly wrong. The fire consumed the church, killing many and scattering the survivors. Yet the Hollow One remained, growing darker and more vengeful. I shivered, clutching the silver locket. Caleb's voice broke the silence. "Why did they do it?" he whispered. "Fear," I answered. "Fear and desperation. They thought they could control the darkness, but it controlled them instead." I glanced around the silent library, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. This wasn't just a story from long ago. It was a living nightmare, and now it was my turn to face it. That night, sleep evaded me. The weight of the diary's revelations pressed on my mind, like the dense fog outside my window. Caleb was restless too, his small frame curled beneath a thin blanket. Eyes wide open in the darkness, I decided to return to the forest, the heart of the mystery. The Whispering Woods called to me like a siren's song, luring me deeper with every step. I told Caleb he should stay with Mrs. Whitaker, but he refused. He said he needed to face the darkness with me. Together, we crossed into the thick shadows beneath ancient oaks. The moon hung low, casting ghostly beams that barely pierced the dense canopy. Every snap of a twig echoed like a scream in the silence. The whispers returned, softer this time, as if testing me. "Clara," they sighed. I whispered back, "I'm not afraid." The forest seemed to breathe around us, alive and watching. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled, and a gnarled root broke the surface. Curling like a serpent's tail, from the earth emerged a faintly glowing sigil, the same symbol from the diary. Caleb gasped. "Look," I said, tracing the symbol with my fingers. "This is where the ritual was performed." A chill ran down my spine. I knelt and placed the silver locket on the symbol. The ground pulsed with energy, and the whispers rose to a deafening roar. "Release us," they demanded. I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of courage. "We will end this," I promised. But deep in the shadows, I sensed the Hollow One, stirring, angered and impatient. This was far from over. No sooner had I promised to end the curse than a chilling wind tore through the trees, knocking Caleb and me off our feet. The whispers turned into agonized screams, echoing through the woods like a banshee's wail. The Hollow One emerged from the shadows, larger and more terrifying than ever. Its cracked bark skin glistened with dark sap, and its eyes burned with ancient fury. Branches twisted around it like chains, rattling as it moved closer. I could feel the forest recoil in fear, but the Hollow One advanced, roaring in rage. "Clara!" Caleb cried, clutching my arm tightly. "We have to run." But I stood my ground, gripping the silver locket tightly. "I won't let you win," I said. The Hollow One reached out with gnarled limbs, and the earth shook beneath us. Roots burst from the soil, trying to trap us. Caleb struggled free and shouted, "Clara, the locket. Use it." With no other choice, I held the locket high. It shone brighter than ever, casting a protective glow around us. The Hollow One recoiled, screeching in pain. "You cannot break the bond," it bellowed, but the light grew stronger, fueled by my resolve and Caleb's faith. Suddenly, the creature let out one final, ear-splitting roar and vanished into a whirlwind of leaves and shadows. The forest fell silent. Breathing heavily, I looked down at Caleb, who smiled weakly. "We did it," he whispered, but deep inside, I knew this victory was just the beginning. The Hollow One's wrath might be quelled for now, but its curse was far from over. The forest grew still again, but the silence was uneasy, as if it were holding its breath. Caleb and I sat on a fallen log, catching our breath, the silver locket warm in my hand. "I can't believe it's really over," Caleb whispered, eyes still wide from the encounter. I shook my head slowly. It's never really over with things like this. The Hollow One is part of this land now. We just pushed it back. As dawn broke over Blackwood, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden light on the damp forest floor. I looked around at the woods that had both terrified and fascinated me for so long. I felt a strange mix of fear, sadness, and hope. Clara Morgan had faced the darkness and survived. But the story of the Whispering Woods was far from finished. There would always be whispers, secrets, and shadows lurking beneath the surface. And I knew I would be there, listening, telling their stories, for those brave enough to hear.